All right, so now we're going to go over first 3 questions only because they are the most urgent ones, okay? We do have some questions on factoring. I think factoring is very important, but we can wait on those ones, okay? So that's why I urge you to check your answers at home and please make sure that you do that. Now, for question number 1, the most common mistake that I've seen students making is the failure to distribute properly, okay? So to distribute properly, you will need to make sure that you distribute in both terms, okay? That's one early mistake that people tend to make. Okay, same thing right here. Oh, I firmly believe that by the end of this month or next month, you will be perfectly great with all these distributions. Okay, so, all right. So again, the first mistake tends to be the failure to distribute properly. The next one, okay, what's the next step? What's a good, easy next step? Combine like terms, right? So so you would just say, oh, combine like terms. So that would be -2 plus 19. Now I know it's tempting to use your cell phone to calculate, use a calculator. I would tell you, please don't. Do yourself a favor. Do not use calculator. That will help you in the long run. If you use calculator to do some simple calculations like this, you are letting your calculator to replace your brain. And that is going to be very bad. Okay, so please, okay, please make sure that you do not misuse your calculator. We will use calculator later on, but not in this situation. Okay, so we all have this. The next thing it's we have to combine like terms even further. So let me ask you a quick question. Do you like to keep the y, the variable, on the left or on the right? Left? Okay, sure. Now, in Algebra 1 or geometry, you were told to do something like this. You were told to write something like this, right? That's what you do. In Algebra 2, I can share something with you here, is that you do not need to write this anymore because we are smart enough to know what you're doing. So what you need to write is that, oh, you're subtracting 16y, so that you have all the y on the left. You can simply write down minus 12y on the left. The same thing goes with the 7. You do not need to write down minus 7 on both sides. You just, do it in your head and you say, oh, 24. Because we are smart enough to figure out what's going on. In Algebra 1, in geometry, we want to make sure that you are showing your thought process very clearly. So we say, all right, please make sure that you do it. Any questions so far? All good? Okay. And then what's the next step? Divide by 12, right? Now, and this is where some students may make a mistake. Instead of divided by 12, you know what could be a common mistake that they do? Huh? Worse, a little bit worse than that. Some students, they would do this. Okay, I will show you the mistake right here. Some students, they look at the minus 12, that's the stimulus, right? So that, and then what they do? They did this. Can you see why some people would do this? Okay, so you need a very strong argument and say, nope, that's not what you would do. You will, again, do what? Divided by -12 because you want to solve for y. You want to get y by itself. And you want to divide by -12 because what's the relationship between -12 and y? They are multiplying. So you do the opposite, which is dividing. Okay, make sure you have a little argument in your head. Okay, so that you know why it's equal to -2. Okay. Now, while we're here, talking about this, let me also show you another way to do this in a very simple and very simple way to get the right answer. Okay, so let me just rewrite this. Now, by the way, let me ask you a question. You're trying to solve for this, right? You're finding a solution. What is the meaning of the word solution? Don't say answer. Because if it's answer, they could have just used the word answer. What's the meaning of the word solution? How about if you have seen the word solutions before? Right? So now I want you to know that there are reasons why people hate math or they don't learn well in math because they just, they don't know the word's meaning. And if you don't know the word's meaning, sometimes you just don't know what to do. So let me give you the meaning of the word solution. And you can write it at the top of the page. Solution or solutions, they are value that makes a statement true. Value of values that makes a statement true. Now, if you have a little bit of background in computer programming, how many of you learned computer programming? Just one, two-ish, okay? So if you have a little bit of background in computer programming, then you have a better sensitivity to the word true and false. And if you did not learn any kind of computer programming, I strongly encourage you to learn something. Maybe JavaScript, maybe Python. It's very easy to pick up. And you want to pick up a computer language, okay? So solution means things that would make a value, make a statement true. So let's put our emphasis over here. Negative 12 y it's equal to 24. To make this statement true, that means we need to make the left-hand side 24 as well. So then we ask, negative 12 times what gives you 24? It has to be negative 2. If it's just 2, you would get negative 24. So this is a conceptual process. Like the one on the left that I showed you, that's a mechanical process. We taught you, you showed it. Okay, it's negative 12y, so you divide by 12. On the right, it's more about thinking. You think about, how do you make it true? And that's why you need to know the meaning of the word solution. And I'll remind you throughout the school year, the meaning of the word solution. And solve means simply to find out the solution, to find out the value of values to make a statement true. All right, any question for number 1? Are we good? Okay. Now for number 2. Number 2 could be challenging because I don't think you have done lots of function notations back in geometry, which is understandable. So we have p of x, which is negative 4 times x minus 15 close parentheses squared plus 2. And then now we said, hey, could you find out what p of 7 is? P of 7? What does it mean? How do we interpret this p parentheses 7? What does it mean? It means what? Now, if we say that, that would be p times 7. But if you pay attention, it's p of 7. Like we say p of x, right? What's the meaning of p of 7? So that's telling you, hey guys, you know what, for this case, all the x's that you saw earlier, they are now 7. Easy, right? It's all about knowing what you're reading. It's p of 7, so hey, all the x's, boom, 7. Now, this is a pretty treacherous ride right here because I saw a lot of students struggling here. They're like, should I distribute this first or what do I do? This all brings you back to PEMDAS. What does the P stand for? Parentheses. E? exponents, M, D, and A, S. Okay, so we go with a P, okay? So, well, you take care of the parentheses first. That gives you -8. Okay, so that's the first challenge. Do you know PEMDAS? All right, if you know, great. And now on to the second challenge. Hey guys, what's the meaning of the word, the notation here, square? What's the meaning of square? Multiply by itself, right? Multiply by itself. So what do we have here? We have -8 square. That means it is -8 times -8, which gives you +64, not negative, because the negative times negative becomes positive. So when people say math is hard, you know, it's difficult, it's all about, do you know what you're reading and what you're writing? If you know what you're writing, and by the way, show good notations. Show good notations. Okay, if you don't show good notations, you're gonna hurt yourself. All right, so 64 times 4. Ooh, 64 times 4. Is it hard to do it mentally on paper? All right, so let me teach you a way to do it faster. Okay, now on the side, you can do this. So 64 times 4, right? Now, would you agree? Would you agree that 64 times 4 is the same thing as 64 times 2 and then times 2? Would you agree? Yeah? If you agree with this, what's 64 times 2? That's easy, right? What's 128 times 2? 256. Or if you think this is difficult, then I would just tell you, hey, 128 times 2 is the same thing as 128 plus 128, which is 256. So this is why I say you don't need to use a calculator. But if you find some calculations hard, let me know. I would help you to show you an easier way. But do not rely or misuse your calculator. So you have -256 and then plus 2. Don't forget the negative. I think some of you put down 258 yesterday because you forgot the negative. So it's very important that you are persistent on your notation writing. Okay? Very good. How many of you thought that it was difficult, but now it's like, oh, it's all right? How many of you feel that way? I hope you feel that way soon. Okay. All right. So question number 3. Question number 3. It's about this table, and they're asking you to find out the slope. How do you calculate slope? What's the slope equation? Louder. All right, very good, excellent. Okay, so if you don't know this, I would urge you that you please do. How many of you know this equation? Raise your hand. Yay, all right, make sure you know this equation. Let me ask you another question. So it's a linear line, right? There are 3 forms of linear lines, and if you're taking the SAT soon, you need to know all 3 forms. But now I want to ask you, can you write down the slope-intercept form? That's the slope-intercept. How many of you say I could write down the point-slope form? Okay. All right, now let me go back to the earlier question. How many of you know how to write down this equation, slope equation? Raise your hand. Okay, you can write down the slope equation, and I have a news to break to you. You got scammed by your earlier math teacher. There is no reason that you know how to write this equation and not know the point-slope form. And that was me too. I was so angry that I found out the relationship between the slope equation and the point-slope form. If you know this equation, you know the point-slope form. And let me show you. Now, if you're okay with this, all right? If you're okay with this. So are you okay that I'm going to multiply the denominator over? Are you okay with this? Just multiplying the denominator to the other side. And I'm going to erase the 2. Point slope form. Okay. Now, of course, sometimes we like to put it this way. Y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. That is the point slope form. So if you know your slope equation, there is no way that you shake your head and say, I don't know the point slope form. There's no way. I got scammed. You got scammed. Your earlier math teacher did not tell you. But don't feel bad. You actually knew it. You knew it all along. Your teacher just didn't show it to you. Are we good? Okay, so don't forget about these forms of linear equations. So since we're talking about it, this is the point slope form. Okay, what do we call this one again? This is the slope intercept. This is the slope. This is the intercept. Okay, and that's another form. The what? Standard form. What does it look like? AX plus BY, you see. Now, I'm just going to jam in a little bit of extra information here. Okay, it's not relevant to this question, but I want to show it to you since you are going to take the SAT. SAT loves to give you the standard form because it tells you almost no information. Your job, though, your job is to change the standard form into slope intercept so that you can create a graph. So I'm just telling you, okay? If you are thinking like, oh, I'm going to take the SAT, then answer this question. Do you know all 3 forms of linear equations? And do you know what you're going to see on the SAT? Are we good? Questions? All right. So since we know how to answer this question, we know the slope equation, then let's go ahead. Now, one mistake that people tend to make is that they forgot to label the points. Which one is the first point? Which one is the second point? So when they do the subtraction over there, they became inconsistent with the subtraction. So make sure that you know which one is point 1, which one is point 2. It's all up to you, by the way. It's all up to you. Okay, 1 minus 9 at y2 minus y1, and then x2 minus x1. So this problem, okay, what they're trying to see is that do you know how to find out slope? And do you know how to handle subtraction of negative numbers? What's -2 minus -7? There will be -2 plus 7, which is 5. Okay, so be consistent, use parentheses. Okay, you will see me using all these notations very often. Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop right here for this particular piece of paper. For the other ones, I would say I would urge you to look at the answer key and see how to get it right. And we will do a lot of practicing on factoring in the future. So don't worry too much, but I'm just going to give you the notice that we need this. We need this, and you need this to do well on the SAT. Okay.